Welcome to our explainer. Okay, a quick note before we dive in. Today's topic gets into a really controversial and frankly offensive conspiracy theory. Now, our goal here is absolutely not to endorse any of this, but to take apart the narrative and see how it's constructed. We're going to be breaking down a sprawling theory from a Russian-speaking media personality, Snezhana Yegorova, that tries to connect pretty much everything happening in the world today.
So the whole thing kicks off with this one central question. Where is everything heading? It's a question a lot of people are asking, right? This really sets the stage for her explanation of a world that she sees as just spiraling into total chaos. And let me tell you, she provides one very specific and very radical answer.
The idea here is that you're being bombarded with all this stuff, all these seemingly random headlines. You've got fuel shortages over in Europe, Tucker Carlson suddenly flipping on his support for Israel, Trump's statements on Iran changing, and of course, the ongoing war in Ukraine. She calls this a kind of overwhelming news noise and argues it's designed to confuse you, to make you feel lost. She asks, is there a single thread connecting all of this? Is there any light at the end of the tunnel? Well, in her view, these are not separate crises at all, not even close. She argues that these events are all just symptoms of the same disease, and they're all linked by one single overarching concept, one that she came up with herself. And this brings us right to the core of her theory. She calls it the Fourth Jew Reich. She defines it as this massive worldwide network that's operating from some unidentified central command. And this network is supposedly executing a coordinated global plan and has already locked down control over key strategic places, like Israel and Ukraine.
So the next question is, who's actually in on this? The theory then points to key figures that it claims are actors inside this big framework. And the idea is that these leaders, they aren't acting on their own. Nope, they're all following the exact same playbook.
Now here's where it gets really specific. The speaker draws a direct line between the actions of Benjamin Netanyahu and Donald Trump. She claims they're running the same plays to hold on to power. For Netanyahu, the allegation is he starts wars just to distract everyone from his legal problems. And for Trump, it's that he just casts aside allies to keep his financial backers happy. This connects to a really central part of her theory, the idea that Ukraine was basically a laboratory for all of these techniques. She alleges that Western organizations use the country as a testing ground, a place to experiment with methods of social control to see what works, before rolling them out on a much larger scale. And from there, the theory zooms in hard on Ukraine. It presents the country's situation not as just a consequence of war, but as something that was deliberately engineered, an outcome designed to completely transform the country from the ground up.
To back this up, the speaker points to this number, 8 years. That's the prison sentence under a new Ukrainian law that criminalizes anti-Semitism. But she argues that the official reason for this law is just a cover for its real, much more cynical purpose.
She argues this law is actually a weapon, a tool that will be used to throw anyone in prison who criticizes what the state is doing. Specifically, it's meant to silence people who might object to the large-scale transfer of land and assets to new foreign owners. So that 8-year prison sentence, it's really a tool for a massive property grab. And it doesn't stop there. The theory then lays out a plan for what it calls population replacement. On the one hand, you have the alleged policy of forcing Ukrainian men to come back from all over Europe to fight. And on the other hand, you have the government supposedly talking about bringing in foreign workers from places like Bangladesh and Pakistan.
This all leads her to make this really stark and, of course, incredibly provocative comparison to sum up her view. She alleges that the Ukrainian government is intentionally creating the same conditions in Ukraine that she claims Netanyahu has imposed on Gaza for decades. Okay, so from that intense focus on Ukraine, the theory zooms way back out to the global stage. And here she presents what she describes as a deliberate 4-stage plan for the entire world, a kind of modern, man-made apocalypse. She outlines this 4-stage sequence, modeling it on the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. First, she says you had the pandemic. That was step 1. Then you have the wars we're seeing now. That's step 2. She claims these are just the first moves in a pre-planned agenda, and that they'll be followed by a manufactured famine and then a final stage of death, delivered through things like climate weapons or chemtrails.
So after laying out this incredibly grim global plan, she doesn't actually end on a note of despair. Instead, she wraps it up by offering what she sees as the only way to resist this global takeover. Her solution is, well, it's a radical return to a past ideology.
It calls for the reunification of all the post-Soviet states, and it also calls for a revival of historical figures and narratives, like actually rehabilitating Stalin as a necessary force to fight back against what she calls this globalist plot.
And that's our breakdown of the Fourth Jew Reich conspiracy theory. It is a wild ride, and a really striking example of a story that tries to give one single, unified explanation for a very chaotic world. It really leaves you with a big question, doesn't it? What is it about these all-encompassing theories that can make them so compelling to people who are just trying to figure out where everything is heading?